Welcome, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome council, members of the public, and staff to the 2024 budget deliberations scheduled for January 30th, February 1st, and February 6th. The agenda with the proposed budget was published on the township's website on Friday, January 26th, enabling members of the public and council to become familiar with the material we will be discussing throughout the next couple of meetings. Meetings are being held in a hybrid manner where members of council and public can watch and participate in the meetings in person or electronically. The meetings are live streamed and recorded and available on the township website. All rules apply to the meeting as if everyone was attending in person, and if there is a problem with the technology impacting the proceedings of the meeting may be recessed at the discretion of the mayor to confirm that the electronic format is performing effectively before proceeding further into the agenda. In the event of connection or service interruption to those attending electronically, the mayor may recess the meeting to attempt for reconnect. So as to the process for the January 30th, February 1st, and February 6th meetings, if the agenda is confirmed by council, this meeting will provide an opportunity for members of the public to address council under the section of the agenda called open forum, and that will be held this evening. During open forum, any individual may address council to voice their opinion on the 2024 budget. Persons can only speak once and for no more than 3 minutes. Anyone wishing to speak at this meeting can raise their hand at the appropriate time. If they are in person and if they are participating via Zoom, they can use the raised hand option. Following open forum, staff will provide presentations on the budget and council may ask questions. During the presentations, if any member of council would like to consider an item to be added or to be removed from the budget, the member should ask that the item be included in the parking lot. The clerk and the treasurer will keep track of the items in the parking lot. Once the staff presentations are completed, council can revisit each item in the parking lot separately, and I would ask for a motion at that time. Any debate and comments can be made at that time as well. As per the procedural bylaw, no meeting shall exceed beyond 10 p.m. and therefore, at the end of this meeting, I will ask council to recess so that we could reconvene at 6 p.m. on February 1st in the council chambers, starting with the rest of the agenda items. So the first item is the adoption of the agenda. It's recommendation that the agenda for the January 30th, 2024 meeting be adopted as circulated, and that the procedural bylaw be waived to permit open forum within the committee of the whole. Do I have a mover? Councillor Broderick, so moved, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Motion is passed. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof for the meetings dealing with the budget? Being none. Open forum. So as was mentioned, the first 15 minutes is dedicated for open forum. You can speak, I'd already mentioned it, that you can speak once for 3 minutes. And I just want to mention that any notice is hereby provided that under the authority of the Municipal Act 2001 and in accordance with Ontario's Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, that all information provided for or at a public meeting, consultation, or other public process are considered part of the public record. In-person meetings, of course, have resumed, and we will be doing this meeting in hybrid. So we have one person that has signed up in advance, Sue Blay. If you would come forward, and there's this. Yes. Yes. I think that mic should be turned on, but you can just speak into it and we'll. No. If the mic isn't working, then people in the virtual audience can't hear you. That's why it's very, there we go.
Thank
So
you.
please,
Is that okay?
please proceed. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, members of council and staff, I just want to thank you for the opportunity of addressing you this evening and to thank Shelley for sending me the 2024 budget binder, which I found very fascinating reading. You can't hear me. Is that better?
That's great.
That's better. Okay, thank you. In previous presentations before you, I've itemized in detail the financial, the environmental, the health, and the quality of life advantages of the public transit system. While I applaud your initiative in facilitating public transit in Amherst View with the number 10 bus going to the Cataraqui Center, which also includes subsidized taxi services for the disabled, I was disappointed to read of no such public transit initiative for we who live north of Taylor Kidd, especially in light of the encouragement by the provincial government for accessible transportation. I live on a farm in a rural area. We are on septic tanks. We use well water. We have no sidewalks, no street lighting, no medical clinic, and no bus service. I have read repeatedly of your admirable goal of ensuring infrastructure and resources that are in place, and I quote, to support balanced growth. Surprisingly, I see that an outdoor splash park is earmarked in 2024 for $200,000 and in 2026 for $1 million. I'm surprised that the seasonal recreational water park item would take precedence over a year-round public transit system, and this is your priority. In closing, may I draw your attention to page 46 of the document in which you will review the expansion of transit services. There's no budget amount attached to this as it's to be done in-house. Before this comes up for discussion, may I offer a challenge? Each of you who is going to be involved in this decision, that you leave your keys on the kitchen counter. You may then come to appreciate my passion for public transit. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak this evening under the open forum? Being none, go to the virtual audience. If there's any member in the virtual audience that wishes to speak this evening under open forum, please use the raised hand feature and we can bring you into the meeting. Being none. So the next item is the 2024 draft budget presentations, and I will turn it over to the CAO to start off the discussions.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. Staff are before you tonight with the proposed draft 2024 budgets, both operating and capital. I'd like to thank staff immensely for putting this together, and specifically Director Jenna Campbell for bringing this together. As council's aware, we have been without some senior finance staff for quite a few months this year, and as a result sort of found ourselves behind. So I appreciate your patience in getting the final documents and in allowing the budget to be presented in the new year rather than in last year. I will go over briefly the presentation. Let me just see. Perfect. And the order for presentations tonight. I believe answers are best brought when the relevant division is presenting, and you can ask, and that will be at a late, if answers cannot be provided tonight, they will be put together and brought at subsequent budget meetings for council's information. So tonight I will begin with remarks, and then we will present the general rate operating budget, followed by transit and ferry area rates and utilities operating budgets. If we have time, we will get to general rate capital, the utilities capital, and then next steps and questions. We do have 3 nights of budget meetings planned, and we'll recess if we're not able to get through it all. So the budget, like everything that the municipality do, is done through looking at strategic priorities. As council's aware, you adopted a strategic plan in 2019 that was to direct the council and the municipality until 2023. We have worked with council, and there's a draft was presented last year with respect to new strategic priorities, and these will be finalized and brought forward to the council early in 2024. From those, council did identify 4 key strategic priorities which help direct the framework for this budget. And those are strong communities, sustainable infrastructure and services, balanced growth, and organizational effectiveness. And you will see throughout the budget binder that's been presented how organizational initiatives and projects for the year that are included in this budget match some of these strategic priorities. Staff also use some of our constating documents. Some of the priorities are set through the official plan and growth study, asset management plan, infrastructure master plan that's in draft currently, our climate action plan, rate studies, various growth studies, development charge studies, and the rec master plan that is coming. All of these documents inform how staff prepare the budget for you. The budget building blocks were based on a few things, one being public input. There was a public survey that was open from August to September, I believe, to obtain input on the public's priorities, and that was presented to council last fall. The asset management plan also guides our capital needs. Personnel are needed for the impacts of growth and the projects that the municipality wants to do. We will also rely on the CPI for increases, as well as collective agreements we have with CUPE, OPSU, and soon this year negotiating the IAFF. Also, part of the building blocks are external agency and third-party requirements. So this could be external agencies such as our OPP and our conservation authorities, but also our contracted third parties services that the municipality is required to do, insurance and utilities. All of these matters feed into where we find ourselves with the budget. Like many municipalities this year, there's a number of challenges that Loyalist is facing. I think that all municipalities are facing, and as you've seen some of the headlines, some of the increases that municipalities have had to set for their tax rates. Certainly staff recruitment and retention is a growing problem in the municipal sector, where we are finding it difficult to fill positions on occasion, and staff are doing a lot of movement. Of course, post-COVID vehicles, equipment costs and supply chain issues continue to abound, and the cost of inflation increases fuel prices, contracted services, and supplies. With our growth, Loyalist has a growing demand for services that we try to meet, and that is part of the public input that goes into this budget. The provincial mandate of housing affordability and supply is ever there, and the municipality attempts to meet that for our municipality. There will be some comparisons in later sections that the treasurer is presenting, comparing us to our neighboring municipalities. And we still have to live with the unknown issue of the provincial reassessment, which is not yet been set. So staff are presenting, as we will present later, a budget of 5% increase. And we've presented here, and I believe, you know, at the time that the departments present, you may be able to ask some questions, but these are some items that have been deferred or were cut from the operating budget to get to the current draft budget. So any increase to the capital contribution from the operating budget as recommended in the asset management plan was not included. There was some requirements for GIS to extend their intern. That was excluded. Deep cleaning of facilities, facility preventative maintenance. The outdoor movie nights have been canceled. Legacies of Loyalist, the oral history documentary. We were trying to do part 2. That also has been removed. Event supply trailer. Aquatic programming on the weekends been removed. a contribution to our bridge reserve as recommended by OSIM there has also been removed. Any planned cemetery monument maintenance has not been added. The physician recruitment incentive has been reduced from the previous $60,000 that was approved by council to $20,000 per year. Any accessibility upgrades at the Odessa office, which were previously planned, have been removed and recreational revenue increases were, however, included to try to also help offset that, an interim increase in recreational revenue. Similarly, in the capital budget, a number of projects have had to be deferred quite simply because we couldn't afford them. The Odessa Fire Hall expansion, still a 40-foot in front road, although there is a portion in there to remain that you can discuss with Public Works at the time, but not the whole reconstruction. Maple Road and Simmons Road reconstructions, portions of both of those roads were due for improvements. The Scotland Old Wilton Road, the south end has been removed, the north end remains in the operating budget. Some planned upgrades to the Willie Pat field, scoreboards, and soccer pitch irrigation, for instance. Also, there were planned increases in the annual maintenance program for core assets as recommended by the asset management plan. That's currently been deferred as well. Pedestrian crossovers, the Queen Street Drainage Project, a wash pad, the County Road 6 Roads Garage that was not included in the previous construction. Mobile driver feedback signs and the message boards, and a number of other reconstructions on Huff, Havergal, Asbury, Cornell, Littlefield, Rothwell, and Havergal. And the Violet Road resurfacing of the bridge area north to the Sharp Road. So those capital projects have also all been deferred and are not included in the current proposed capital budget. One thing that we do have that's nice to have for us is the increase in growth of both residential and industrial that we see happening. What we see, however, is that the revenues from those growths are not quite here yet. And until we have some more assessment, what services do we need to supply for those growth? And so we're in a bit of a holding pattern here, certainly until we realize some of that extra revenue. We're happy that it's coming in, but council is aware that council did adopt a community improvement plan for that industrial growth, which does rebate to them some of that assessment taxation that we see from that industrial growth, so it delays the benefit and the taxation from those. The treasurer will speak, I'm not sure about this meeting, but is going to be working. Our treasury staff have been here only a month or 5 weeks now, and so they need a little more time, and we'll be preparing this year come summer a 10-year capital plan, so we can look at when that growth is happening, what our capital needs are, and make a plan for that. We'll be back to council to prepare and present that. So this budget really is a bit of I guess a status quo budget. We haven't changed services, and we're just proceeding with sort of existing policy as adopted by council, and haven't made a lot of I'm going to say changes because of sort of new staff, and we need some time to review some of these items that are in the budgets to be able to present next. So the budget process, as we are, staff are going to make presentations, which is a great opportunity for council to ask questions. We will review and discuss budget items here, and we will be maintaining a parking lot. The treasurer has a sheet that she can share. So as there's items that come up that you either want to cut or add, they'll be added in with a kind of a running total at the bottom and what that means for the increase. So we do have that available for these three nights of meetings. Out of our 3 committee of the whole budget meetings, there will be recommendations which will be adopted and put into a sort of a revised budget. This is a draft right now. Once those recommendations are adopted by committee of the whole, the final budget will be presented out for comment and available for public input, and will be presented finally for council approval on February 13th. That's all I have. If there's no questions.
Any questions from council? Councilor Prager.
If I could just, through your worship, just ask one about just On the pages where you mentioned the cuts or the things we weren't going to do this year, can you just pedestrian crossover, can you be specific on that? Where it might have been?
I can't specifically,
Okay.
but when the appropriate department presents, I'll have them bring
Okay.
that up. They can make
Thank you.
note. Thank you. So I'll turn it over right now to Shelley Steedle, our treasurer, who will go through the general rate operating budget and some of the general items for you.
Thank you. And thank you to Mayor and Council, as well as to, I'd like to say a big thank you to, as well to Jenna Campbell, who is the Director of Corporate Services, who has helped immensely pull the budget together. Also, a big thank you to the directors and managers who are here tonight and presenting, because it's actually their budget. I just pull the numbers together at the end of the day, so they've actually done all the heavy lifting, and it will answer most of the questions for council. And also thank you to the finance staff, especially my new deputy treasurer, Arthur Smith, who has just started the same as I am. And we will get through this budget, but honestly, we have lots of that we're seeing that's the township is doing that's going to come to fruition in the next few years. That's going to make these budgets a little bit easier, we hope. So we'll start with the 2024 general operating budget. And give you some of the highlights of what has happened with all of the changes that have been made from the 2023 to the 2024 budget. The bottom line that we're sitting at with this draft budget that we're presenting tonight is the township residential tax rate increase is at 5%. The tax levy requirement is up to $21.5 million. This year, the debt payments are 0.6 million. So that's changed from last year because last year was a bit of an odd year with the changes for the debt, but so 0.6 million, and then a contribution to capital projects of $2.6 million, which is, we'll talk about this a little bit later. It's straight line from what it was last year. We haven't really made any changes there in order to reflect, keep the tax rate as low as we can. So the 2024 proposed levy requirement actually is $1.9 million. And 870,000 of that is coming from growth. And the CAO Murphy had spoken to about it's a good place to be, and we're actually seeing it reflected in our assessment growth this year in the rules that was returned from MPAC. So that helps. And then the balance, the $848,000, is from the rate increase. So that's the 5% increase is what it's coming to. The overall levy increase is 2.6%, or a five-year average. And you'll see the numbers that are being presented tonight. There's a comparison back to 2020, just so you can kind of see where tax rates and levies have been for the past few years. The overall tax rate increase at the bottom of the screen, the 2.6%, that includes the township as well as the education and the school boards. The education rates education and the county rates. The education has been set. The ministry set that rate, and it's at the same level as 2023. County rate has not been set yet. So what we've used for just for example purposes tonight is use the same level that we used in 2023. So. Oh, sorry, just taking a little bit of a pause here.
Sorry, Your Worship, we're just correcting the streaming online currently.
I just got into a flow, so. Okay, then breather. Anyway, yeah, so just, if there, I don't know if there's any questions on the tax rate increases, but those we'll revisit them a little bit later after we've walked through the rest. No, mine's not working. Okay, so this, this screen shows an average. So this is a tax rate increase, it's the tax rate increase comparison from different municipalities across the province. So there was this study, this is just a survey of 25 municipalities across the province of Ontario, different municipalities that have actually completed and finished their budgets in 2024. The average rate increase is 5.26. So you'll see this number is actually a lot higher than what it has been in previous years for an average. And I know there are some other municipalities that have not quite completed their budgets and they are higher this year as well. So we just thought that that would be a good comparison. But there are a number of municipalities behind in their budgeting. So we, by all means, are right on target with lots of other municipalities in the province. The next slide shows you a comparison, and this is similar to what you may have you've seen in the past. This was the 2023 residential tax rates in comparison to our neighboring municipalities in the area and where we sit. And you can see that there's the two orange lines are Loyalist Township with the general rate as well as with the area rating. So that's why there's two different lines shown there. And the next slide shows the a comparison of the 5-year township levy requirement and the residential tax rate. So you'll see it has been increasing, which is fair. It's been increasing across the province. This also is the calculation for the tax rate, the taxes owing is the assessment times the tax rate. So whatever the tax is, the assessment is for the whole municipality times the tax rate. Next slide. This is an overview, and if there's any questions, we can get into this. We'll get into the specifics as we go through it, but it shows the proportion of where the average tax bill is going. So this year with the 2024 projected increase, it'll be an average monthly residential township tax bill of $188. And you'll see some of this breakdown we've got for the different departments: corporate, human resources, finance services, emergency services, community customer services, economic growth and community development services, some external agencies, the capital contributions, debt repayment, and reserve and reserve fund contributions. So this is where all of the tax dollars are going. Next slide. And this is where we're going to start to get into some numbers. And all of these numbers, just as we follow through, you'll see at the bottom of some of the pages, it'll say when in the budget binder where the detail is. So I may be going through this rather quickly. There's lots of detail in those binders. They're great. And they're available online. So, and if there are any changes that are made out of the next few days when we're having these discussions, we'll update it and make sure that there's a final budget binder that's put online. But you'll see our proposed rate on this page is we've done the the draft, the revenues and expenses, and then what the net amount is for. So external agencies, and again, all of the different community group or the different divisions within the municipality, and then where the revenue is coming from or is at the bottom half of the page. So like I said, this is really high level. When we get into the detail, you'll be able to see where the money's going. The next slide shows the operating changes. And this is what the change is from 2023 to 2024. And talking about where did that $1.9 million, like how did we get to it? And we've had changes, small changes in grants, fees, and user charges. We have had actually additional revenue that's coming in from licenses and permits. And we've got other revenue that's been reduced, and reserve funds that has we're not taking as much. The expenses, the changes you'll see, the big one is the debt and principal interest. That was a big change because we had one unusual year last year. The other rates, the other numbers are going up though. So we've got 9% salaries and wages, insurance 10%, and utilities 10%, contracted services 6%. Those are pretty heavy numbers this year, and that's part of the reason that we're seeing the increase that's going to the bottom line. So overall, the net levy change is up 9.7%. Okay. This is a summary of one of the pages in the book, but yeah, we definitely will give you a copy of this, and we'll give you a copy of the entire PowerPoint, and we'll post it on the website as well once we get through it. We just want to make sure that we can get through today and see if there's any other changes that happen as we get through. Next one is the operating fund reserve withdrawals. And you'll see there's various different projects that we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth. Some of these have been ongoing for the last few years. So the word boundary review, there's money that's going aside each year for that. The tax incentive grant is what we had talked about. This is the industrial tax incentive grant. So we're actually taking some money, we're putting money into reserves in 2023, and we're going to pull it back out in 2024 for payments that will be owing. We've got a contingency in case there is the MPAC reassessment. And the reason for that is that if the MPAC does do a reassessment, quite often the year following the reassessment, there's a lot of applications for reductions in assessment. And so there's a lot of write-offs. So that's what that contingency has been set up for. And some of these other ones I won't talk to in depth. You're going to get presented with the different departments, and they'll talk about, you know, IT and some of the different studies that are going on. Okay, so we're taking out of these operating fund reserves, we're going to be taking $1.4 million. So next slide. So internal allocation, and this was talked about. There was a couple questions about this. What happens is there's work that's done within the township that is actually attributable to other areas that are rated separately, or the levy is coming from different monies. So the utilities, the water and sewer rates are being paid by water and sewer bills. So we do an allocation. So if we have overhead that's within our departments, we make sure that it's allocated out so that it's reasonably reflected in the water and sewer rates instead of in the tax levy. The same thing happens with the transit and with the ferry, because they have their own rates, or they have another way that the ferry in particular, we levy the money, we bill back to MTO. So we make sure that we allocate our expenses that are done within the corporate overhead back over to those areas. So this is just a breakdown. That's a very high level general rate budget review. If there's any questions at this time?
Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, through the mayor. Back to the comparison to the other municipalities, I think that's very useful and helpful. I don't expect you'll have it at your fingertips, but maybe if it is available, perhaps for the next meeting, is it available, a breakdown of the total increase? What portion of that for each municipality is due to operational increase versus a capital increase? Because I think that kind of split is important information to have for these discussions, if possible.
And just through your worship, just to answer back on at least some background that I do know is that, so in particular with our budget, we allocate a portion into the capital reserve fund, and then we put the reserve fund as much as we can and then pay for it. So that's usually what most municipalities are doing. So they'll break their tax levy rate into a percentage. So they'll have, if it's say a 5% increase, 1% would go towards that capital levy. So I'll do what I can to find out that information. Yes.
Any other questions? Councillor Broderick.
Just through your red light. Okay, similar to that, all those municipalities you broke down, maybe for tomorrow or whenever we're back here, I guess, just an indication of which ones of similar population, where we stand, like with our, I guess, 18,000 or wherever we're at now, just to get an idea of similar sized communities.
Sure. Yep. Yes, we can bring that back.
Councillor Willis.
Through the chair. On that same slide with the comparison, it is interesting, but I did note that Tweed is at 19%. So rather than average, could we look at a median on what the increases have been? Because that one really, I believe, is probably skewing things a bit.
Yes, that's no problem. We can take the median and definitely. I will say there are some municipalities that I have heard of that haven't finalized their budget yet that are looking at numbers that are that high as well. So, I'll see what I can find out by Thursday if there's more municipalities. Yeah.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk now about I'll start right into the non-departmental portion of the budget. And this deals with the first section, which is property taxes, capital contribution, reserve funds, debt principal and interest, and a few other items as well. And again, you'll see the budget binder pages at the bottom if you're trying to follow through with the budget binder where we're talking about. So just overall, the non-departmental, there's an increase, or sorry, a decrease of 2%. And that is due to more money that's coming in from the revenue side of things. Next slide. Slide. These are some key operating revenues and expenses. So you'll see included in the numbers is interest and penalty revenue. That's on taxes as well as on any investments. And then 535,000 for the annual funding from the community benefit agreement with relation to the transfer to the reserve. This $2.6 million that I talked about, the contribution to capital from the general rate to operating, that number has not increased from last year. It's left at the same amount. The OMPF grant revenue, debt, and then 597,000. We had talked about that. That's the debt principal and interest, and 550,000 contribution to fleet equipment and replacement reserves. And that's, again, we're putting all the money back into the reserves. And then there's a separate plan that talks about how we're spending the money for each, and we'll talk about that when we get to the capital portion of the budget. Next slide. Okay. The non-departmental changes, some of the key operating changes. So payment in lieu of taxation is up $195,000. Those are grants instead of actual taxation. That is a better estimate than what has been done in the previous years. So there was actually revenue that's been generated. So that we believe is a solid number. OMPF is down $40,000, and that has to do with the calculation that's done at the province. And then interest and penalty revenues is down $50,000. So that's usually related to the taxes and better collections on taxes, which is a good thing. So it's a loss of money, but any questions on the non-departmental?
Any questions at this time? Seeing none, please proceed.
Okay. External agencies. So the two external agencies that the township has is the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, and the conservation authorities. Next slide. And you'll see this is good news in the budget is that the OPP number actually is down 2% this year. It's $39,000, but it helps. Conservation authorities, however, have gone the other way, and they're up 6%. So the total for the external agencies is down 1%. And this slide shows the total decrease in the total amounts. You'll see even though the OPP was down, it's still a hefty, large portion of the budget. And the two conservation authorities are the Cataract Way Conservation Authority being an increase of 5%, and Quinte Conservation an increase of 8.9%. Okay, any questions on those?
Any questions from council? Council Bride.
Through your worship, just a quick one. OPP down 2%. What is that as a result of?
That's the result. That's just formula and usage.
Okay.
Jenna wants to talk to that.
Yeah, so that's primarily due to a reduction of the calls for service proportion that were charged as compared to the neighboring municipalities. So it's gone down again this year, similar to last year.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please proceed.
Thank you. So now to the finance operating budget. We actually are seeing the difference between 2024. The draft budget is down 20% from the 2023 budget. And just some key, next slide. Key operating revenues and expenses. So we have the administrative recoveries, which is bill reprints, et cetera. So those are user fees that are done within the finance office. We have tax billing, printing and mailing, about $23,000, and annual independent audit is $28,000. So those are just some of the highlights. In-house, some strategic initiatives and key operating changes. We've got the asset management plan, which is going to be done in conjunction with corporate services, and initiate recommendations to achieve the next milestone for that and the completion. So that will feed in with a number of different plans that the CAO was talking about earlier, and we're really going to try and aim towards having a mid-year long-range financial plan update so that we can see what all of the strategic plans are going to cost us and see how we can finance them. So that's one thing that we, that my deputy and I are going to try to get completed, like I said, by mid-year. And also there's a reduction in our budget of 116,000 due to labor impacts from just from changes in the realignment of corporate services. And the previous year, there's a reduction from previous year completion of post-retirement WSIB benefits, $8,000. Okay, so that is it for me. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah Campbell, Corporate Services.
Okay, thank you. As Shelley alluded to, the focus generally in corporate services this year is focused on our shift over towards strategy and innovation arm, as well as a number of plans that the directors in the area are going to speak about. Primarily staffing is what you will see is the largest change in the budget for corporate services as compared to last year. And as the Director of Finance alluded to, that's just due to some of the realignment that happened within corporate services and people shifting around. But I did want to note there's no net new full-time equivalent staff in the corporate services, finance, and human resources areas that are planned. So the total increase for the entire sort of corporate services area is 177,000 or 5%. And just on the next slide, there are a few specific items that we're looking at doing this year that the managers are going to speak about, primarily including the ward boundary review and an IT master plan, as well as a lot of work looking at our projects and procedures and policies to increase our effectiveness, both within the department and throughout the organization. So some of the key strategic initiatives, and sorry, I should note that this section does include the CAO's office. So some of these items are related to the CAO's office as well. So we have, just on the next slide, please, Anne, thanks. Physician recruitment incentive reserve contribution in the amount of $20,000, as well as the ward boundary review that is planned to commence this year at a cost of $75,000. I spoke about the departmental realignment and some of the changes and increases to staffing in this specific area. And then reducing the number of studies in this area resulted in a bit of a reduction in contracted services this year as compared to last. So with that, I would invite Andrew Hooper up to talk about the information technology specific division.
Thank you. So while 2023 was a productive year for both the IT and GIS divisions, both of whom completed a significant amount of work, IT was focused on building resiliency into the township's network infrastructure, as well as deploying a new server environment and preparing a disaster recovery site for hopefully no future use, but it's there if need be. While 2023, as I mentioned, was a productive year, 2024 is a planning year. We'll continue to deploy the normal annual projects such as workstation replacement and things like that. But we'll be looking to continue with the GIS architecture review as well as the development of the IT master plan. Just a little bit about the architecture review. It's being completed to provide guidance with the implementation of a new GIS system. The focus of the review will be to assess the current needs of staff, external agencies that may use GIS, as well as the staff in the organization that need that service as well. 2024, we'll continue to review the current operating expenses within the division, and we'll be looking for areas of opportunity where we can reduce going into 2025, while maintaining a focus on security and resiliency. The IT master plan is being proposed to help the municipality develop a 5-year plan for its IT division. The IT master plan will be investigating several areas within the division, such as assessing the IT infrastructure that's currently in place. It'll be considering staffing resources, business processes and procedures, as well as needs and opportunities within that division. Coming out of this plan, we are expecting there to be recommendations that will need to be implemented across the span of that 5-year master plan that could have financial impact. That's it. Any questions?
Any questions at this time? Seeing none? Thank you.
All right.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. So for the Marketing and Communications Division, we've outlined some of our key operating expenses on the slide that you see in front of you. So as listed here, some of our key expenses will be the 36-page municipal calendar, which is distributed to all residents in the township and businesses in the township via Canada Post. So that's 8,800 calendars that goes out annually with municipal information. Additionally, the township also rents for roadside billboards, which are positioned at locations throughout the township, and messages and artworks changed on a monthly basis to ensure content is fresh and information is shared with residents. And last year, with an enhanced advertising investment that was supported by council, we began sending direct mail communications to all residents across the township as well to highlight key projects. So some examples were budget engagement, town halls, splash pad engagement, rec center consultations at the beginning of last year as well. So if we could just advance to the next slide, thank you. So as you might have noticed on the previous slide, many of our communication investments were traditional or offline media. So approximately 75% of our advertising or communications investment was applied to traditional media. However, through recent engagement activities, we have noticed that many of our residents are engaging through our digital tools, whether that's online surveys, email lists for specific projects, digital forms, those types of tools that we're using. So this year, we're proposing the investment in a development of a public engagement platform. And this would support the strategic priority of strong communities, which has been identified in the strategic plan. Also, the public engagement platform would support the township engagement platform, which was or framework, which was supported by council last year as well. So just for an example, with current tools, what we're doing is we're creating a new contact list for pretty much every project at this point in time, and sort of reinventing the process for each engagement opportunity. So through the use of an engagement platform, we would have a centralized list of contacts throughout the township that we could return to each time there's an opportunity for consultation and feedback, to ensure that they're well informed of what's happening in the township and giving them the opportunities to engage on projects and provide their feedback. And one of the useful benefits of this is that residents can discover some projects in their community, maybe within their specific location, maybe by their area of interest, or by type of project, or also by timeline. So there's a wide variety of ways that they can engage and interact with what's happening in their community. Also, the platform would enable us to engage with a wider variety of tools. So as I mentioned, we're using a lot of online surveys at this point in time. So to truly reach the potential of our engagement framework, digital surveys only provide us with a small level of engagement. So we could offer tools such as mapping, forums, Q&As, participatory budgeting, for example. So there's a wider variety of tools that we can use to make sure that the engagement can reach a higher level of engagement. And additionally, we anticipate by investing in this, we can experience future savings as well on some of those other communication tools that we currently use, for example, surveying subscriptions. So second point, we're just proposing a decreased investment in print advertising. So this is due to a few factors. We've been experiencing some distribution challenges. For instance, Canada Post distribution of some of our flyers, or even the calendars, could be less reliable since those are deemed as unaddressed ad mail. So the delivery isn't as reliable as it would be with an addressed mailing piece. And furthermore, Napanee Beavers discontinued home delivery in the township. So that's created another challenge to reach some of our rural residents that were receiving that newspaper in the past. Like many expenses as well, print costs have risen fairly significantly during the past year. So the cost to run a print ad in a paper that's going to reach all residents has gone up quite a bit over the last couple of years. And as I mentioned, the investment in digital tools would help balance our communication investment a little bit more between offline and digital. And then the last point is the proposal of a development of a new resident package. So this was a stated initiative as well in the strategic plan. And the goal with this would be to create a consolidated list of resources and services for residents as they relocate to the community, and or for potentially long-term residents that are unaware of those services. So we're proposing at this point in time that we would be developing this in-house and printing it in-house, and working with some distribution networks to ensure that we can get those out to the appropriate recipients. So that's the last point on the slide. So I'll just turn it over if anyone has any questions based on that.
Any questions at this time from council? Councilor Willis.
The roadside billboards, did I read there that we rent those?
Yes, through your worship, we do rent those. So yeah, there's a monthly rental cost, and then there's also a cost for artwork changes when we do change messaging.
Is there any logic in buying our own rather than paying rent to someone else?
Through your worship, yes, we have explored the possibility of buying them. The last time we investigated it, they weren't highly available. However, it could be something that we could definitely investigate, and if there's a cost savings there, we could definitely pursue that.
One more, if I may. The public engagement platform that you're speaking of, is that a one-time cost, or is that an annual software fee that we're going to have going forward?
Yes, through your worship, that would be an annual fee. So the proposed fee for that would be an annual subscription fee. So that would be something that we would be paying annually.
Councilor Prager.
Through your worship, just if you can give me maybe even a ballpark, the municipal calendar, how much of it is print versus how much of it is Canada Post? Even a percentage, if you know.
Yeah, through your worship, the breakdown would be about 80% print costs and 20% distribution.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, please proceed.
Thank you, through you, your worship. Presenting the HR operating budget. You'll see on the next slide, the key operating revenues and expenses for the HR division. So $4,000 for an employee long service awards. This is a long-standing program for service recognition for our employees at certain milestones. The $10,000 earmarked for the Health and Safety Committee and appropriate health and safety training throughout the township. $10,000 for job advertisements, and this is for the various job boards and things that we would post our vacancies on. $45,000 for employee-related legal costs, and that is third-party legal assistance for employee-related issues. And $15,000 towards the Employee Assistance Program, which is a program that is offered to all employees here that helps with, family issues, financial issues. It's a confidential counseling service that our employees can reach out to. Next slide. So this is the strategic initiatives and key operating changes. The 65,300 is the full year impact for the HR generalist that was approved in the 2023 budget. That was a new position, and leave coverage and backfill for an HR position in 2024. As Director Campbell said, there is no new net positions in the HR division as well. $40,000 for a non-union and council compensation review, and this is proposed to be funded through reserves. This is part of a strategic initiative, a key initiative of the strategic plan. And this would be done by a third party. And they would analyze where Loyalist sits from a compensation perspective with our municipal comparators. The review will provide information that will be used to inform decisions regarding compensation policy updates and at what level we would compensate non-union staff in relation to our other comparators. This information would be brought to council for further discussion and approval after the study is completed. The next item is $25,000 for an employee engagement survey, and that is proposed to be funded by reserves. Again, this is part of a key initiative for the strategic plan. This is the next step in our seeking employee feedback. We did a future of work study in 2023, and the feedback received through that was the need to conduct a full employee engagement survey. We heard that through the responses from our employees. An employee engagement survey represents how employees feel about the organization, including how motivated they are and how committed they are to staying with the organization. An employee engagement survey will provide valuable information and insights needed to drive effective decision-making for future workplace initiatives and further support this strategic initiative. And the last one, while it's not directly an impact to the HR operating budget, we just wanted to make you aware that there are some to be determined costs through collective agreement negotiations that are still in progress. And that is with our OPSU group for the ferry and the recently ratified IAFF for the professional firefighters. And so we are in negotiations with OPSU and we'll be starting with IAF soon. And there will be most likely some changes to the wages and benefits and things like that in 2024 for those groups. Any questions?
Any questions this time from council? Councillor Parks.
Thank you. Just really quickly, the non-union competitive review, do you know when the last time that was done?
I don't have that number, but I can get that for the next meeting. Yeah.
Okay. And also the engagement survey, has that been done in the past?
I don't have that information. I don't know if Director Campbell, do you know if one's been done? I don't believe one has been completed here before.
Councillor Progress.
Through your worship, just two quick questions. So the employee assistance program, is that a flat rate of 15,000, no matter how many go through the program?
Yes, we have a contract with them.
Okay, and then the employee-related legal costs, similar idea?
Yeah, obviously it depends on the usage of the lawyer, or what issues we have, but, yeah, that's billed per hour.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time?
Your worship?
Yeah.
I have a question to Councillor Park's or an answer to Councillor Park's other question. The last compensation review was completed in 2018.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll proceed.
Thank you.
Good evening. So the emergency services proposed 2024 budget is at 2.5 million, which is an 11% increase from 2023. The next slide breaks it down a little bit more. Just a general overview. The general overhead is a proposed 10% increase, and this is primarily due to our full-time firefighters all now being at their first class rate, as well as inflation and cost of living increases for all other positions. Our fire fleet shows a 19% increase. However, this is a result of fuel now being included, and it was not in that line previously, and that represents 30,000 of that proposed amount. Then our bylaw and animal control, although it shows a 42% increase, that represents our full-time bylaw and fire inspector now being a 12-month position, where in 2023 it was only a 6-month position, as well as a $9,400 increase in the pound fees. Just a few of our key revenue and operating expenses. The largest area continues to be our part-time wages and benefits and the cost to maintain our fleet and equipment in accordance with NFPA standards. There's also the training aids, seminars, and workshops, which has also increased as a result of the province mandating firefighter certification. So 4 of our kind of key points here. In 2023, we completed our community risk assessment. This was a solid foundation to proceed with our master fire plan, which we've included $5,000 to do that in 2024. Again, with firefighter certification becoming mandated, the approximate cost for each firefighter to get them the basic certification they require is $3,500. That does not include any advancement for other courses or certifications if they wish to move up. Again, our fire inspector / bylaw officer, full cost for that in 2024. And then we have some in-house projects that we'll be doing to develop our continuity of operations plan, as well as plans for evacuation and heating and cooling centers. And with that, any questions?
Any questions at this time from council? Councillor Frederick.
One quick question on the fire certification. So ongoing from now, the legislation or whatever the regulations changed, so everybody had to be updated. Does that move forward every year, or is that just a certification until they change the regulations again? Assuming they do.
Thank you. Through your worship. Currently, the way they've mandated it is everyone has to achieve firefighter level 1 and 2 based on our set level of service in our bylaw. I don't foresee that changing. Once they achieve that certification, it is good forever. There's no update to it.
Councillor Willis.
Through the chair. Previously, council approved a program where we were going to recover money from insurance companies when we had incidents. Where is that revenue reflected in the budget?
Through your worship, I'm not exactly sure, but I can get that answer and bring it to the next meeting for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? I just have one quick one. There was one in there for part-time wages. I'm assuming does that cover all of the volunteer firefighters or on-call firefighters that respond?
That's correct. The part-time wages are for all of our volunteer firefighters for training calls, public education.
Everything. Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll proceed.
Good evening. The Economic Growth and Community Development Services Department provides our community with planning and building services, engineering and environment services, and utility services. The EGADS team has 47.8 full-time equivalent employees budgeted for and funded by general rate, utilities user rates, and building permit fees. Next slide, please. So the department's operating budget represents 6% of the total tax levy requirement. The proposed net budgeted levy for 2024 is 1.278 millions. It's an increase of 41% over 2023, or $379,000. The bulk of the expenses for the department is salaries and benefits. This increase is a significant change from 2023, and it's primarily related to sale of industrial and business park land, the 2 new proposed positions in engineering, and the proposed conversion of 2 contract positions to permanent positions in planning and engineering. Next slide, please. So I will be going over the engineering and environment division's operating budget. The engineering and environment division provides a number of key services to other divisions and departments, such as project management of capital projects, engineering development reviews and approvals of site plan applications, plans of subdivisions, and so on. Long-term infrastructure planning through projects such as infrastructure master plan, input through the Amherst-U West secondary plan, and the upcoming waste management master plan. They also manage environmental programs for the township, such as climate action plan and derived initiatives. As you can see, our operating budget shows a net increase of 49% over 2023. Actually, the slide before that. Okay, thank you. As you can see, our proposed operating budget shows a net increase of 49% over 2023. One item of note in our operating budget is that our engineering development approvals team operates primarily on a direct cost recovery model. So our staff time that is spent administering subdivision agreements or completing inspections for site plan applications and reviewing applications is invoiced back to the developers. So we're maintaining the growth pays for growth principle. So the internal labor recovery from developers is expected to be, and the number on the slide is, I think, a little bit outdated, but the amount expected to be recovered is $157,600 for 2024. Next slide, please. So strategic initiatives and key operating changes for the division. The proposed budget for this year for this division links to 3 strategic priorities. Under strong communities, we have the establishment and endorsement of a 10-year capital budget or framework, and this would be done in-house. Now, we're not establishing a 10-year capital budget. Our friends in finance will be doing that, but the division will be supporting, with the support of project managers, will provide input into updating and creating that 10-year capital plan. When reviewing the 10-year capital budget and creating a realistic work plan, it's important to recognize that most of our capital projects occur over a 2 to 3 year time frame to complete due to due diligence studies such as geotechnical analysis and surveys. It takes time to complete design drawings by engineers and architects, then move to tendering and construction. So appropriate planning increases the possibility for projects to come in on time and on budget, but this does require time and resources. Under strong community still, we have project management. This is done in-house. Like, note that this is a partial list of the projects engineering manages. There's a much more extensive breakdown in the budget binder. But I wanted to flag the magnitude of the workload that is carried by 4 staff members, which includes manager and supervisors for that division. Project management requires the proper allocation of staffing, completing procurement, providing directions to consultants and contractors, coordinating with multiple internal divisions, reviewing design drawings and specifications, and engaging in communications with the public, whose expectation to be kept informed has changed drastically over the last 10 years. All takes time and resources to complete successfully. So one of the questions that comes up regularly for project management is, why don't we hire more external consultants for project management? The reality is that this does not save us any internal resources once you consider that someone needs to put together a scope of work for the consultant, gather historical data, field the consultant questions as they come in, coordinate between the various internal divisions, such as utilities and public works, coordinate public engagement for projects. Again, all of that does is add an additional layer to a project and creates potential for breakdown in communication that could lead to lengthy project delays or project cost overrun. Another point under that is the budget for contracted services for 2024 is a decrease of $42,000 over last year. This is primarily due to the IMP, the Infrastructure Master Plan, nearing completion, and we are not projecting the need for additional external assistance this year. Next slide, please. Under the organization effectiveness strategic priority, we are proposing to conduct some much needed review of engineering related bylaws and policies. This would be done in-house with the proper level of internal resources. And we're going to do that by reviewing and regularly updating policies and bylaws. We are able to provide clear expectations and requirements to those who interact with these documents, such as residents and developers. The Engineering and Environment Division has also introduced the concept of service level agreements in 2023. Which included a review of the services that the division provides to other internal divisions for core services mentioned in an earlier slide. What this looks like in practice is improving internal communication and aligning expectations for these services, as well as a transition between internal responsibilities. So answering the question, what is an engineering managed capital project versus what is a capital project managed by other divisions? It provides some clarity. Under the Sustainable Infrastructure Services strategic priority, I wish to highlight two initiatives that would be done in-house as well. One of them is the finalization of our engineering development guidelines. These are being created to help document the township's requirements for new developments and bring clarity to expectations placed on developers. The intent is to ensure the township receives the infrastructure it requires to an expected level of quality and help speed up the development application process. Another important piece under the strategic priority is the adoption of our water and sewer capacity allocation policy. This is being developed in-house as well, and this policy will allow for more transparency and efficient management of our water and sewer capacity. And finally, one of the key operating changes being proposed for 2024 is staffing. So we are proposing a new project coordinator, which would be a second coordinator for this division. We're finding that the demand to project manage facilities related to projects is increasing, and we are recommending these projects to be managed in-house for reasons explained a few minutes ago. This project coordinator would be assigned projects such as the County Road 4, Parks and Garage washroom renovation, the Nelson Store roof replacement, the Wilton Hall roof replacement, the Fairfield Goodside House refurbishment, the splash pad design. The best case scenario would be to fill this position by someone with heritage expertise. When looking at our aging facilities, there will likely be a number of heritage facility renovations required in the next 5 to 10 years. This position would be partially funded through capital budget. The impact on general rate is roughly 20% of this position's salary and benefit for the year. The second new position being proposed is an engineering technician for development tasks to complete field inspection and design review of development files. With recent changes to through Bill 109, reducing development review times or risk of returning application fees, meeting timelines has become even more critical. This position will help us meet these new challenges, and it is partially funded through development fees. The impact on general rate is roughly 44% of that position's salaries and benefits for the year. These two requested positions represent an increase of $140,000 in the salaries budget. And lastly, the request for the project coordinator contract conversion to a permanent position comes from the demonstrated need to have adequate resources to carry out important tasks that are often put aside to deal with urgent priorities. The deferral of these tasks for a short period is okay, but we're finding out that we do not have the ability to circle back to them with current staffing level. This contract position is currently working on the infrastructure master plan, technical report development, legislated energy demand and conservation management plan, including the annual reporting of this data, the sewer and water uncommitted reserve capacity, annual reporting, and also like the bylaw and policy reviews that I've spoke of earlier. There's also an opportunity to assign shorter term projects to that position, such as, Fairfield water treatment plant roof replacement, HVAC replacement of some of the facilities, fire training center repairs. So this request represent an increase of $900,700 in the salaries and benefits budget. So all three positions would improve, as an added benefit, all three positions would improve succession planning for the engineering and environment division by providing resources that can backfill various positions if necessary and continue to deliver the service level that is expected from this division. So that's the engineering and environment. I will pass this on to Andrea. Andrea is the Manager of Development Services for her division.
Thank you. Good evening. Development services. So development services primarily made up of planning and building services, and we're responsible for processing, reviewing, and seeing Planning Act applications through the approval process. So your plans of subdivision, condominiums, zoning bylaw amendments, site plan approvals, and committee of adjustment applications. We also review, process, and issue building permits and septic permits and the associated inspections that go along with them throughout the construction process. Administering the property standards bylaw, economic development and monitoring of available employment land for development, as well as overall growth monitoring for the township. Administering, preparing, and reviewing planning and development documents such as the official plan, the zoning bylaw, secondary plans, and various other bylaws such as the building bylaw, parkland dedication bylaw, and road closing bylaw, to name a few. And this division is also responsible for overseeing the Heritage Committee, primarily in overseeing heritage permit applications, as well as the grant application program. So the operating budget for this year is split into 5 main categories. So planning, property standards, heritage, building, and development. So the development operating budget includes the administration of township industrial and business parks, land sales, as well as the recoverable expenses in the development review process, as well as engineering review of lot grading certificates, which is incorporated into part of the building permit review. The overall net levy proposed for 2024 is $730,200, which is a 36% increase from 2023. Similar to what Evan J just commented on the engineering side, the majority of this increase is staffing, which I'll discuss in more detail shortly. So the more significant revenue and expenses for this division include $90,000 in revenue for Planning Act applications, $905,000 in building permit and septic review fees, $39,000 in revenue in the engineering lot grading certificate review fees. And then on the expense side, $5,000 for the Heritage Grant Program, $11,000 dedicated to legal advice for planning general matters, $50,000 consultant fees for a couple specific studies that are going to be associated with the upcoming township zoning bylaw review, and $56,000 for the annual building permit software. So that would be the City View software to accept building permit applications in. And the last one there to mention as well is $15,000 for the planning consultant. We had a planning consultant last year helping with the overloaded amount of Planning Act application files. And so that's being reduced this year, but there's still $15,000 dedicated to have them just complete the files that they were already actively working on. So moving on to strategic initiatives and key operating changes. To balance growth in the municipality, the following initiatives are proposed. One of them is to identify affordable housing locations and also review our land surplus bylaw in relation to affordable housing opportunities and that particular review of our township-owned lands. That can also be done in conjunction with the county as well. $50,000 for the zoning bylaw review, which I just alluded to. So this project is set to begin and a report be coming to council within the next month in regards to this. The zoning review will include a review of outdated regulations, as well as incorporating a number of policies to be implemented into the zoning from the last official plan review process that we undertook. An example would be allowing detached second units in the rural area. The project will largely be completed in-house, but $50,000 is proposed for a parking consultant to more specifically conduct a fulsome review and making recommendations on our current parking ratio and review those parking requirements based on uses and the needs for them today. We're also proposing funds for a consultant to assist in reviewing areas of the township that may be more suitable for increased density and the appropriate regulations that could go along with them as well to provide for additional housing opportunities. The Amherst View West secondary plan as well is scheduled to be completed later this spring, and there's still $90,000 remaining for consultant fees for that project. And that's reflected in the budget and also includes $10,000 for an area rated development charges study to assist in financing capital projects to meet the increased service needs for that particular area. So in striving for organizational effectiveness, we're also looking this year to do a review of planning application fees. This also includes fees for engineering applications like lot grading. This work will be completed in-house and depending on the result could result in significant more revenue for planning applications. I do anticipate that would likely be the case as a planning application review has not been undertaken since 2016. Some significant changes in revenue from 2023 include building permit fees are projected to increase by over 188,000 due to building permit fee escalation fees as approved by council through the 2022 building bylaw. Increased construction costs and the continued steady stream of building permits being submitted to the municipality. You should note as well that building services is to be fully funded entirely from permit fees in 2024, and $30,000 and $30,700 is being transferred to the building rate stabilization reserve this year. Significant changes in expenses from 2023 include a reduction in $35,000 in planning consultant fees. So the consultant will no longer, which I'll talk about staffing in a minute, but we are requesting that the approvals planner position, which is currently on contract, be made full-time. So if that were to occur, we wouldn't need to rely on our planning consultant anymore, and they wouldn't be needed anymore by 2025. So there's minimal budget proposed in 2024 just to allow continuity and allow the few projects that they're on to wrap those up. Committee of Adjustment and Heritage Committee expenses have increased by $6,500. That's due to heritage designation work as a result of the province's Bill 23, which is removing the heritage interest list on our heritage registry. So we're looking at designating a few properties this year. So there's some costs associated with the heritage consultant as well as legal fees as well. Expenses are also required for new public committee members of the Committee of Adjustment in order to provide remuneration for meeting attendance as well as their mileage costs for conducting site visits. We do have $217,800 of contributions from reserves that were made in 2023 in order to fund 2 contract positions. So that's no longer being done this year. That was the approvals planner and the chief planner last year. And they're now proposed to be funded through the general rate. So that's primarily the biggest staffing impact that's happening on the general rate. We are proposing for the approvals planner contract to be a permanent position. The contract position in 2023 was funded through reserves. And so now that it's being proposed to be funded through the general rate, that'll account for $103,211 increase in that portion of the budget. The current contract position has been occupied with a full workload the past year, which allowed for our senior approvals planner to focus on the more larger complex applications, and for the management team to also step away a bit from some of the planning application file management and focus on other priorities, such as the secondary plan and zoning bylaw review. It's not anticipated that the number of applications to be reviewed will be decreased in the years to come. It's not what we've been observing at all. And moving forward with the transition from contract to permanent, it'll also increase the possibility of retaining talent in some of the current staff that are doing great in their current positions. And then just moving on to the last piece on the Loyalist East Business Park. There are currently 5 lots anticipated to close in 2024. There's 5 lots that have conditional purchase and sale agreements on them. These lots are working that through the site plan approvals process, which is a condition of the respective sales agreements before they can close. And so we're all expecting this to occur in 2024 on these lots. One of the 5 actually just closed a few days ago. So we do have 4 left now, and we've gotten 1 down. These closings result in a total of 666,400 in sale proceeds, with those proceeds going into reserves to fund the servicing of some of the phase 2 lots expenses, as well as any future land, industrial land requirements that we want to put funding to in the future. Thank you.
Any questions at this time? Councillor Pratt.
Yeah, my touch is too soft, I guess. When we talk about growth, paying for growth in general, does that include the salaries with that? Because you mentioned project coordinator, the 2 positions, project coordinator, and forgive me on the second one, I don't remember the term you used, but 20% of the payment for the project coordinator and 44% of the second job will come from tax levies. So I guess that doesn't sound like growth paying for growth if those positions are for growth situations.
So great question. The project coordinator is primarily for capital projects. So that one is the one that 80% of that salary is going to come from capital, and 20% hits the rest of the salary hits general rate, has an impact on general rate. The position that is linked to development is the engineering technician position. So that one, let me just double check. That one, 56% of that salary is covered through development fees. So whenever that engineering technician does an inspection on site plans, inspections for subdivision, does plan reviews, their time, their labor time is charged back to the developer. The rest of the time is spent, like most staff get like training. There's also their time spent on reviewing consent applications. That is not recovered 1-for-1. So that is mostly covered through planning application fees.
Okay, if I can just follow up. So basically, not 100% of that person's time is spent on new development.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, through the chair. In the budget survey results, residents were asked which area they would like to see increased spending on. And the area that received the most support was economic development. 55% of respondents said they'd like to see increased spending on economic development. The area that received the least support, incidentally, was heritage and culture. 9% said they'd like to see increased spending in that area. With economic development receiving the highest support for increased spending, is there anything in your strategic initiatives for 2024 that's responsive to that result?
So that's another good question. Thank you. So what I would say there when we worked on the strategic plan, it was identified that we should have a couple of initiatives there. One of them being developing a business retention, attraction and retention plan. I think before we get to that step, we need to have a review internally of where the support for those economic development initiatives best reside. So until we have that review internally, we haven't budgeted any funds towards that one. So for 2024, but we will review and come up with a work plan. So then we can recommend some funds for 2025, 2026 moving on. Is that?
Thank you. And just to follow up, it does sort of an employment lands or industrial lands land fall into that sort of gambit as well?
So for that part, we are in discussion with the county. The county is looking at doing some implement land inventory work. And we are going to partner with them to get through that initiative. At the end of the day, depending on what comes up, if we need additional implement land, then that would be again another work plan that we put together, and then come up with a funding plan associated with that, but it won't be in 2024.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none? Thank you. I was just thinking we're about halfway through the evening. Would this be a good time to take a break? And we could take 10 minutes or so. Be back 7:45. We'll just resume the meeting. Everything's recording. Okay, that's good. So we'll proceed now and please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next department that we'll be presenting to you is the Community and Customer Services, and that is comprised of Recreation and Facilities, Heritage, Culture and Tourism, Public Works, and Public Transportation, which has been broken out of the Public Works portfolio under previous council approval. The public transportation is not funded through the general rate. It's funded through user fees and ferry fares or rates. So Gaurav will be presenting that, and he'll be presenting that at the very end. Oh, there we go. The Community and Customer Services Department is a very, very large department. It makes up 42% of our general tax rate, and it's has an increase this year of about 13%. And each manager will be going through their own division and discussing their all of the wonderful things that we do for the community. And I'm going to let Carrie Lamb start, Director of Recreation and Facilities.
Thank you very much. So within recreation and facilities, I'm going to start by just talking a bit about what our core services are. So just as a bit of a reminder, so we are certainly responsible for the delivery of inclusive recreation and leisure programming for all ages in all communities, including both active and inactive experiences. We certainly foster community engagement and develop partnerships to promote recreation services in the communities. We take care of the reception, customer service experience and operations at recreation facilities, customer service, contracting and operations of all parks, outdoor sports facilities, community buildings, and arena rentals. We manage 40 parks and beaches, including playgrounds and natural spaces, 7 sports fields and sport courts. And then parks, trails, sports facilities, inspections and maintenance. These are certainly important as we continue to manage risk management and ensure that we're following our legislative requirements. We have the management of the horticulture and tree program, facilities maintenance, including recreation facilities, libraries, community buildings, heritage sites, municipal offices, and the operations garages. We're responsible for facility leasing agreements, and then as well the management of relevant capital projects. We are under the direction of the 2017 Parks and Recreation Master Plan, as well as the 2022 Recreation Service Delivery Review, as well as other corporate plans that drive the work of the division. This year is an interesting year for us as the impact of the W.J. Henderson Recreation Center Renewal Project is, of course, impacting our divisional work plan. We've established a renewal project operations working group who is planning and managing all details related to the day-to-day operations of the facility. The 2024 operating budget is impacted by the renewal project and the closure of the facility from March 25th to September 2nd. I will speak to this within my portion of the presentation. The 2024 Recreation and Facilities operating budget does take into consideration miscellaneous fees rate growth within the operating budget. These increased rates will be presented to council at a meeting in the near future. Overall, the division net operating budget is 3.6 million, which is an increase of 231,000 or 7% over last year. This increase is due to varying items, which I will review in the next few slides. So on this slide, just change my screen here so I can follow along. Within the division, there are many budget departments. However, I have identified 4 main departments themes, which highlight several key revenue and operating expenses. So within facilities, one of our largest expenditures is utilities. So there's $461,000 from all of the budget departments within the division. So this would include such things as hydro, gas, water, and wastewater. It is important to note that this does not include the utilities from the fire halls or from the utilities facilities itself. The next largest expenditure within the facilities is contracted services, and this is $431,000. This is a large increase year over year. Contracted services has experienced a substantial price increase across the portfolio. It includes such things as portable washrooms in parks and at sports fields, pest control, waste management, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, water treatment, refrigeration services at the arena, tree contractors. It includes such things as fire testing, our fire systems in the facilities, mat services in the public spaces, and snow removal at the W.J. Henderson and the LAC lots. Those services are contracted out based on the fact that those facilities are open 7 days a week, and for the length of time that they're open to the public, we don't have the labor and or the equipment to be able to do that in-house. The third item under facilities is the rent at the Manitou office. That's a budget line this year of $170,000. It is important to note that preventative maintenance programs are being introduced at our township facilities. This is being incorporated into operating budgets where possible. Preventative maintenance will not only extend asset life, but will provide efficiencies and provide cost reductions over time. For the program to be successful, additional budget impacts will be identified in future years. The second important item on this slide under revenue and expenses is parks and sports fields. You'll see a very large number of $934,000 for parks maintenance. This is for day-to-day maintenance of all parks and outdoor spaces maintained by the parks teams. This does include labor, the horticulture program, trees, turf management, garbage collection, parks and trails, playgrounds, and the new commemorative program. Some areas of the park maintenance is a year-round service, as many people continue to enjoy this infrastructure year-round throughout the winter season. And the next item is the $166,900 under sports field maintenance. This is day-to-day maintenance, including labor of turf maintenance, grooming, washrooms, garbage collection, as well as the materials and supplies required to maintain the fields. It also includes management of the new outdoor rink program, which we're currently working with volunteers in an effort to build an open rinks in Amershott, Bath, and Odessa. But this, of course, is pending the appropriate weather to do so. And the third item is community buildings and libraries. So the community buildings and libraries consist of all of our heritage properties as well as the Amershott Community Hall. The net operating cost of our designated heritage properties is $129,000. It's important to note that this is not the cost to activate the sites. This is just our cost and facilities to operate the sites. So this does not include what Heritage Culture and Tourism is doing at the sites. The $129,000 does take into consideration that the Fairfield Goodsite House is closed this year. The heritage property maintenance budgets are minimal and will need to be addressed with the preventative maintenance program in the future. And then the fourth item is recreation and leisure, which includes programs offered at the Leisure Activity Center, the Amershott Community Hall, the arena, as well as programs offered throughout alternative locations in the township, such as parks, sports fields, skater park. We are offering programs throughout Wilton Hall, the Agricultural Society, Layer Cake Hall, and at the schools. We certainly depend on other infrastructure and other properties in order to deliver our programs. It also includes aquatics, which are currently operating at a BGC, the West End Hub, as well as the YMCA Wright Crescent location. So to highlight just a few budget items for you, the arena rental revenue is at $303,000 for 2024. This is strictly rentals. It does not include the township ice programming such as public skating, shinny, adult skating, and parent and taught skating. Those are separate budget lines. There's $146,500 for recreation and leisure program revenue. This is the revenue that's drawn in just from the child and youth programs as well as adult and senior registered programs through our recreation team. The cost to rent pool facilities in Kingston is at $40,000 this year. And the cost to advertise our programs with the assistance of our corporate communications team is at $48,000 this year. So that's maintained year over year. That has not changed. So if we change to the next slide and talk about our strategic initiatives for this year. There you go. There we go. The 2024 division work plan includes several initiatives identified in the Parks and Rec Master Plan and the Recreation Service Delivery Review in addition to the strategic plan. The Recreation Master Plan, as approved by Council in July 2023, given the growth of the township, the age of the current plan, the 2017 plan, and the request for new park amenities, it was recommended that the township move forward with a new master plan in 2024. In November of 2023, Think Design was contracted, and staff have been working with the consultants preparing for public consultation to begin in the coming weeks. The goal is for a draft plan to be brought to council in the summer of 2024. The cost of the initiative is $135,000, of which 50% was funded in 2023, leaving $65,000 to be funded in 2024. The second initiative is a youth engagement plan. Through the corporate strategic planning process, an initiative was introduced to develop and implement a youth engagement plan with a focus on connecting youth with co-op partnerships, volunteer engagement, and participation opportunities. This is a multi-year initiative that once implemented will be ongoing, requiring review and updating. In 2024, work will be completed with internal resources within the recreation team and among community partners and agencies willing to participate. It's important to note that other internal staff and divisions will also be consulted and included in this. We have actually already started work and are having meetings with the high school related to this initiative, and this work will be done in-house. The third initiative is related to the current Recreation Service Delivery Review recommendations. So within that review, there are recommendations related to policy development. There's two policies that we will be focusing on this year. The first being inclusion and equitable access policy. The second being an affordable access policy. The second one, the affordable access policy, the goal will be to begin drafting that policy in 2024 with a target completion in 2025. Although the program delivery staff continue to receive training to ensure we meet High Five standard, there still needs to be formalized training. So the fourth initiative recognizes that, the second initiative under the service delivery review is training and development. High Five is Canada's only comprehensive quality standard for children's programs. High Five's approach is to build on quality framework consisting of program assessments, awareness policies and procedures, and training development. All of our township instructors receive this training and certification through High Five. It is important to note that this is an expectation of all of our program development, and every program we deliver has an instructor that has this for all of our child and youth. So there is a cost estimate in here of $5,000. It includes the High Five, but it also includes additional other professional development for our several other full-time staff within the recreation development. Within the recreation division beyond just the High Five training. It's important to note that post-COVID, none of our full-time staff have received any additional professional development since, and it's important that we continue to invest in what they're doing within the industry. And the fourth strategic initiative is partnerships. Staff will continue to explore new partnerships to complement the current services. The goal is for partnerships to improve and/or enhance the delivery of recreation and leisure services. So included in the 2024 budget is a new potential partnership with the Amherst Island Recreation Committee. Further details on this partnership will be brought forward to council as details of the actual partnership are defined further. Other new partnerships will be identified and information will be brought to council, including details of the level of service and the financial impact. As you know, we currently have partnerships with BGC, and we are currently exploring alternative partnerships with organizations such as the Kingston Seniors Association, as well as the Bath Gardening Club. So if we can move to the next slide, we'll be looking at key operating changes. So there are several key operating changes within the division. The key pressures that are impacting the overall budget. So obviously the closure of the WJ from March 25th to September 3rd. Certainly we're seeing a drop in revenue. There's usually 2 or 3 more weeks of ice, as well as then rentals of the facility itself when it's dry pad. So we're seeing revenue drop, but then we're also seeing expenses drop. So $22,000 in revenue, $13,000 in expenses. Contracted services, we've experienced substantial increases, as I've already spoken about. So you can see that As it breaks down, the arena, LAC, and Recreation Administration has over $17,000 in increased in contract services. Parks and sports fields is over 75,000. A good portion of that is portable toilets, believe it or not. Community buildings and libraries, $56,000, and municipal facilities is up $14,000. Utilities, sports fields and parks is up almost $7,000. Recreation facilities is up almost 14,000, municipal facilities 9,000, and community buildings almost 10,000. Given the low participation numbers for weekend public swimming, a key operating change this year is the cancellation of our weekend swim programs. Registered swim programs continue to be offered weekdays through the township at BGC and the YMCA. The impact of the weekend cancellation, swim revenue will be down about $11,600. However, staffing, facility rental, and materials and supplies is down almost $35,000. We were seeing anywhere from 2 people to 15 people show up for public swims on the weekend. We were seeing some registration for the actual swimming lessons. However, the need was on Tuesdays and Thursday nights when we could get that pool time. So given that the split of cost versus revenue recovery, we felt this was a wise decision moving forward. The next one was actually related to aquatics as well, the private swim lessons. Cancellation of private lessons was done to maximize group lesson offerings. We felt that it was better to maximize our instructors to the maximum number of children they could have versus having 1 or 2 children per instructor. So it did result in a drop in private lessons. However, we're maximizing where we can our group lesson revenues. And then the last one is our horticulture and public works operator. This is actually a conversion of a 6-month horticulture contract position and a public works 5-month winter contract position into a full-time permanent position. So the conversion actually is an impact of $22,520. However, the impact overall will find efficiencies from hiring, advertising for the position, training, and the number of times we're having to do that on an annual basis versus putting somebody in the position one time, hopefully, and bringing them into the team, finding consistencies, finding someone who has the experience and the knowledge, and then providing a proper person who's going to provide some consistency in the role and be able to form part of a team and be able to move forward. We felt this was a better way to move forward. We're also finding that as we advertise for contract positions, we're seeing that we're not seeing the skill set that we would like to see versus when we're hiring for a full-time permanent position. So that's why we're recommending that those 2 contract positions be formed into one full-time permanent position. So at this time, I will sure, that's probably the best.
Any questions?
Just a quick question. Through the recreation and facilities, you've got contracted services across pretty much every single box. Just wondering what an example of some of those contracted services would be. Just curious to wonder, we're contracting it out instead of doing it ourselves.
Yeah. Through your worship, one example would be the portable toilets in the sports fields and the parks. So we have several parks that don't have permanent washrooms where we put portable toilets. Another one would be the winter control at the LAC and the WJ Henderson. Pest control is another one we contract out. So we don't do that ourselves. Another one would be having a company come in that does all of the fire testing of our fire systems. We have to have somebody come in to do that. The arena, we require an outside company to come in to do all of the valve checks and checks on the arena plant. So those are all of the different things that the contracted services lines add up to be.
Any other questions? Councilor Ennis.
Thank you, through the chair. A couple of the key expenditures, the utilities for all the facilities, 461,000, the Manitou office, 170,000. Are any of those expenditures reallocated to other divisions? Or did it all sit with your division?
The utilities specifically?
Or the Manitou office. Either
Yeah.
one.
So each of the facilities has their own department code. So each building has its own facility department so that we understand what the cost of each building is costing. We've lumped them together for presentation purposes, but there's actually 26 budget department codes that fall within me so that we understand what each building is costing.
Just a follow. So, but are any of those kind of per building expenditures then reallocated to divisions outside of CCS? No.
If I could answer that correctly, I believe they're not. Yeah.
Any other questions at this time? Councillor Parks.
Thank you, through the chair. Just wondering, with the libraries, it's my understanding that there's an arrangement with the county that the township provides the facility to host the library. Do they pay a rental or like a fee back? I might have missed that somewhere. I'm not sure what the deal is with that.
Through your worship. No, it is the lower tier's responsibility to provide the infrastructure and the upper tier provides the service.
Yes.
Just one other question. Just wondered if there'd been any consideration with the Henderson Arena when the ice comes out to do things like ball hockey in the spring or other programs that might be used by our communities, if that's something you're exploring.
Through your worship, absolutely. That is one of the things that the operational working group is doing is looking at partnerships. So it's not just what the township can offer through programming, but what partnerships are out there. Can we be looking at bringing the Ontario Lacrosse Association in to run a demo day to try and drive a new organization? Or can Kingston Lacrosse come in to try and bring in more use? Is it ball hockey? Can we be running youth nights where we could be bringing basketball nets on the floor and running a basketball program? Is there pickleball opportunities inside? Is there event opportunities? That floor surface offers many opportunities for us to be maximizing that space in so many different ways. Absolutely, you're correct.
Inline skating, roller rinks.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's making a comeback.
Councillor Broderick.
Through you, your worship, you beat me to the P word. I was going to ask you about that, but so just back to the libraries, if I may, a 12% increase, is that, I know our staff cleans the library. Is that I guess, where's the 12%? Is that overhead? Is it lighting? Is it water? Like, where does that come from?
Through your worship, I could take a look and get back to you at the next meeting if I may, but off the top of my head, it's most likely just reallocations, internal reallocations of staffing, but I can take a look and get back to you on that.
Okay, and if I may continue, just to give me an idea, and you can just ballpark it and give it to me somewhere down the road. A facility like the WJ or any one of our facilities, what's the ratio between labor costs and overhead? If, you know, I know you probably don't have it, just to be interested to know what, where that is.
I will look into that for you.
Thank you. And just the last one, removal of snow at municipal sites. Is the Henderson the only one that's contracted out, or are they all is this contracted out? Are they all contracted out?
Through your worship, it's just the WJ Henderson and the LAC.
And that's just a lack of machinery and personnel that's done, or is it just personnel?
It's related to both machinery and then the personnel to run the machinery based on the hours of service and the number of days we're open at those facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, we'll proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie. Good evening, Council. I'm pleased to be here this evening to present the 2024 operating budget for the Heritage, Culture, and Tourism Division on behalf of the HCT team and the Department of Community and Customer Services. The Heritage, Culture, and Tourism Division's mandate is to support the township and its residents, providing resources and dedication to focus on the numerous historical assets and their preservation, the cultural vibrancy, and tourism opportunities within the township. Through the support of council, staff, community stakeholders, and residents, the division strives to emphasize public enjoyment of heritage and culture while building local and regional partnerships to enhance Loyalist Township for residents and visitors alike. The division's core services include the planning, organization, and implementation of township-hosted community events with a key focus on creating inclusive, accessible, and meaningful experiences for residents and visitors to enjoy and celebrate the township. The stewardship of 4 township-owned historic sites, including the management and care of the 4 corresponding township-owned museum collections. Fostering collaborative partnerships with community stakeholders and volunteer organizations. Leading volunteer engagement, activation, and recognition. Developing and implementing community activations that appeal to a variety of demographics. Continuing to strengthen and enhance Loyalist Township by expanding opportunities to share and celebrate cultural diversity, and working with local businesses and stakeholders to promote and encourage the development of tourism and community economic development. The Heritage, Culture, and Tourism Division has a full-time staffing complement of 2 with additional support staff during the summer season. As you will see here, the division is proposing a 2024 budget of just over $598,000, which results in a net levy impact of $554,000. This is a 16% increase from last year's budget, which reflects the request for 1 new full-time staff to be added to the division's current complement of 2. As you'll see on page 49 of the budget binder and highlighted here on the screen, we have identified 5 key operating expenses within the proposed budget. To streamline community event operations, the lead planning and implementation of the annual spring egg hunt will be moved into the Heritage, Culture, and Tourism Division's portfolio. This annual community event is a beloved staple within the community, which we aim to provide for all to enjoy. Staff are proposing to continue the traditional light up the season celebration in 2024, including the continuation of the new holiday trees in the township program. Funds will support the event operations along with the purchasing of additional commercial grade lighting as we move forward with our conservative approach of increasing lighting within the park. Staff are requesting a $10,000 budget to support the preservation, interpretation, and exhibition of the historic Babcock Mill and the Bath Museum. $5,000 will be allocated per site. Funds will be used to develop engaging and educational interpretive displays as we expand tourism operations at the Babcock Mill and redevelop the Bath Museum floor plan to expand capacity and increase accessibility. Staff are proposing a $14,500 marketing budget that's directly associated to the division. This includes costs related to the Corporate Explore and Play Guide, which is a cost share initiative with the Recreation and Facilities Division, along with a conservative marketing plan to promote annual events and activations throughout the year, and materials to highlight and promote our historic sites during the summer tourism season. Staff have identified a $41,000 budget, which supports the facilitation and supplies for all heritage, culture, and tourism-led community events, engagements, and activations, excluding the costs related to Light Up the Season in Bath Canada Day. This $41,000 also includes the supplies and contracted services for 13 community events, 3 months of activations at the Bath Museum and Babcock Mill, and cultural educational opportunities that will highlight and celebrate cultural diversity within the township. Expenses within this category also include the annual $5,000 operating fund, which is provided to the Fairfield Homestead Heritage Association as per bylaw 2023-045. And next, we're proposing an event budget of $34,500 for the annual Bath Canada Day celebration. Majority of these expenses will once again be funded through the traditional channels, including sponsorship, grant funding, and vendor fees. This budget request aligns with the 3-year plan that was introduced in 2023 that sees a portion of the reserve fund used annually to help offset event costs. At the end of the 3-year plan, the goal is to have the reserve hold and maintain a $15,000 balance to support the annual pre-event planning and possible shortcomings that may arise. Upon that time, the fundraising initiatives will be reactivated and sponsorship requests will be increased to support the event costs year over year. Lastly, on the screen, we are proposing the hiring of 6 summer students once again this year. The students will activate the historic Babcock Mill and the Bath Museum, providing tours and opportunities for public engagement throughout the summer. Although the Fairfield Goodsite House will be closed for the 2024 summer due to the very exciting restoration project, 2 staff will still be hired and will be directly assigned to support the ongoing collection management project that is currently underway while the house is closed for restoration. Staff have applied for summer student grant funding and are currently awaiting results. Okay, so as you can see here, we've highlighted 4 strategic initiatives for the division. So the first is to establish cultural program offerings at the museums and historic sites. This will be done in-house. So building upon the Exploration Days initiatives that was launched in 2023, staff aim to continue developing our educational and cultural activations to engage with residents and visitors and celebrate our local history. Examples include the special guest tour of the Babcock Mill by the Babcock brothers themselves, a pottery workshop that was hosted at the Bath Museum connected to the Let's Dig It exhibit, and a virtual speaker series which included a talk on the British home children. These activities will be expanded in 2024, creating fulsome experiences for museum visitors and those interested in our local history to gather and learn. The second initiative shown is to create museum policy and procedure and initiate first steps in developing an arts, culture, and heritage master plan to align with the standards for community museums in Ontario. This will be done in-house. The township has an obligation to preserve, protect, and conserve the historic collections that we hold in public trust. Staff have identified the need to update and create policies and procedures specific to museum management that align with provincial, national, and industry standards and guidelines to properly conserve and protect the collections, which will ensure their stability for future generations. The third initiative that we've highlighted is to develop a civic awards program to support attraction, retention, and recognition of volunteers within the township. In 2022, Council adopted a volunteer management policy and training tools to help engage, train, and support people who are carrying out volunteer activities that benefit the township, the community, and the volunteers. Last year, the Heritage, Culture, and Tourism Division proudly engaged with over 71 volunteers through community events and committees. This equates to approximately 625 hours of volunteer time donated to our community. The new Civic Awards program will be proposed for 2024, will recognize and celebrate the efforts of our community volunteers. The Civics Award program will honor the meaningful contributions and roles of the volunteerism and community service have in making the township a thriving, innovative, and sustainable place to live, work, and grow. Lastly, on the screen, staff aim to further expand the recognition and celebration of cultural diversity by hosting educational opportunities and incorporating inclusive partnerships into our roster of community activations and events throughout the year. For example, this includes Culture Days celebrations, an Indigenous ceremony that was introduced during the Bath Canada Day event, and a National Indigenous Peoples Day school programming that we introduced in 2023. So on our last slide, we have summarized some of the key operating changes that are being proposed for the year. So the first box here shows a reallocation of internal labor costs associated to the installation of the holiday lights at Fairfield Park and the setup of the holiday trees. Staff will continue to refine tactics to ensure that there is effective use of resources. The next box shows costs associated for the request for the new permanent full-time employee to be added to the division in 2024. Council established the Heritage, Culture, and Tourism Division in 2021. Within the first 2 years of the division's creation, the 2 full-time permanent staff have been focused and dedicated on resurrecting, creating, and implementing community events and activations. This was the key area of focus as we work to help the community to reconnect post-COVID and celebrate together. With a strong foundation of community events and activations now in place and the large heritage restoration projects underway, the Heritage, Culture, and Tourism Division is requesting a 3rd full-time permanent staff member to allow for focused attention on museum management. The requested position for a community enhancement coordinator would allow the current staff of 2 to focus on other critical areas of divisional responsibility, including proactive long-term planning for township-owned historic sites, the care of the 4 township-owned museum collections, and the development and implementation of policies and procedures in order to adhere to the ministry's community museum standards within Ontario. Meeting these standards will allow the township to become more competitive with grant funding applications. Currently, without these policies and procedures in place, the township is ineligible for funding, such as the Community Museum Operating Fund. This new position will also enable the division to create focused plan on developing our historical assets as tourism's assets, while supporting the existing events and activations to ensure continued success and balanced growth. If this new position is not added, current levels of service will be decreased as divisional staff will be required to move focus to the township-owned heritage properties and their collections. The next box shown is a deduction of $13,000 in expenses associated to the lineup of community events and activations planned for the year. As CAO Murphy mentioned, this decrease is a primary result of the removal of the outdoor movie night series that was introduced in 2023. And it also includes some small reductions in other areas of the event operations as well. Staff do plan to seek sponsorship opportunities with the hopes of bringing the outdoor movie night series to residents if possible. Lastly, we are showcasing a decrease of just under $7,000 in the marketing expenses directly associated to the division. This deduction reflects the true costs that are related to the 2023 Explore and Play Guide and the conservative change to event marketing, as Trevor mentioned, with the changes in print. So in closing, 2023 was a fantastic year as we welcomed over 21,000 people to township-hosted community events, shared and celebrated our local history with over 2,000 visitors to the Bath Museum and Babcock Mill, and continue to develop and strengthen relationships with over 95 local businesses and community stakeholders. We are excited to continue celebrating the diverse culture and heritage that makes Loyalist Township such a special place to live, work, and play. Questions?
Any questions at this time? Councillor Parks and then Councillor Prophet.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a couple of quick questions. The full-time position, I understand it's going to be a partial position this year. How many months are you anticipating that?
Those budget figures are with the person starting beginning of May.
Okay. Follow-up? Just in regards to the summer students, you'd mentioned that you applied for the summer student applications or grants. If that funding comes through or a portion of it, where will the difference between the wages and the grant money go? Will it go back into programming or how would that be dealt with?
I don't know.
Through it gets applied to their salaries.
Mhm.
It's to the student salaries.
Oh, but then there would be like a surplus? Because if you're budgeting for 72,000 and so you get $30,000 back in grant money, I'm just wondering where the difference goes from the wages. Because you wouldn't be paying out the full wages, you'd be getting grant money back.
Yeah, surplus. Yeah.
Or it stays in the department then? No.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily, because the department is funded through the general tax rate, so it would go in the surplus.
Okay, thank you.
Got it this time. I think my question through you, Mr. Chair, is very similar. So light up the season, Bath Canada Day, those totals in a perfect world, if you raise that much funding or sponsorship, those dollars would be in your department sitting there until they're either reallocated or used. So that's basically your upper limit minus any sponsorships. Is that?
Yeah, correct. Yes.
Okay. And just with the communication, so am I understanding this correctly that your marketing is going to be intertwined with Trevor's department in that sense? It's not, you're not operating in two different silos, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Through you, your worship, we work in collaboration with the corporate communications division, and the funding associated to marketing within heritage, culture, and tourism is directly associated to promoting the events that the division is hosting and expenses directly related to the division.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm pleased to present to you tonight the 2024 Public Works operating budget. The Public Works Division is responsible for approximately 250 kilometers of township roads, another 98 kilometers of county roads, 1,000 streetlights, 40 kilometers of storm sewers, sidewalks, and corporate fleet management. The division also looks after waste management services and crossing guards. Transportation services, transportation portion of the budget is the largest portion. This part of the budget includes the maintenance of the township roads, bridges, culverts, street lighting, sidewalks, and public works facilities. There are several pressures on this budget in 2024, and the budget includes some financial corrections related to the calculation of benefits from 2023. It includes increases for traffic calming initiatives, garage maintenance, new provincial stormwater regulations, insurance, reallocation of management costs due to the change from the separation of public transportation from public works, and as well as to utility costs. This budget includes the conversion of 2 5-month winter contract positions to 2 full-time positions. We are forecasting a 19% increase in the transportation services budget for 2024. This follows a 1% decline in 2023. The transportation services county budget represents the cost of maintaining the county road network within Loyalist Township. This budget is heavily impacted by winter control expenses for the county road network. As noted in 2023, the county and lower tiers have been working to minimize the inflationary adjustments with the goal of reducing the township's net levy. It has been agreed to maintain equipment rates and base allocation rates at 2023 levels. The budget is forecasting a net levy reduction of 38% in this area. The lighter than average winters over the last several years have resulted in large surpluses for both the county and township winter control budgets. Budgeting is generally based on a 6-year average for winter control, with a reserve fund established in 2021 to make up for any above average winters. The cost related to the blizzard 2022 was excluded from the 6-year average due to the extraordinary nature of the event. Starting last winter, Public Works has also switched the urban areas along the lakeshore, which typically see warmer conditions, from our standard sand salt mix to straight salt for non-icing events. This has increased the efficiency of snow removal in those areas, along with savings due to the reduction in sand use in spring street cleaning and catch basin cleaning. The revised winter control average has reduced the budget forecast for the township by 5% and for the county winter control by 9%. Stormwater management shows a 7% decrease for 2024. However, this is primarily due to the reduction in the infrastructure master plan costs from 2023 and the reallocation of some labor costs to other areas. The overall public works budget includes the conversion of a 5-month winter contract position into a full-time technician operator to assist with the new provincial legislation related to stormwater treatment and monitoring. And I'll speak to that a little bit later. The budget also includes additional costs for stormwater modeling and locates. Waste management includes waste collection contracts, recycling contracts, landfill operations, and household hazardous waste. Waste management is partially funded by the township's pay-as-you-throw bag tag revenue and revenue generated by recycling programs and stewardship fees we receive from RIPRA, as well as the general rate levy. Waste management continues to see large inflationary pressures due to waste collection and recycling contracts, which are tied to CPI. Additional rental equipment materials is included in this budget for the construction of landfill site roads and the reshaping of some portions of the landfill to ensure that the maximum capacity is met over the life of the landfill. Overall, waste management costs are up 40% over last year. Due to the ongoing shortages of labor, crossing guards continue to be supplemented with public works operators. However, additional crossing guards hired in 2023 has reduced this budget from last year, and we continue to work for a full complement of guards as well as some relief guards. Some of the key revenue and operating expenses for public works in 2023. There one. So some of the key revenue and operating expenses for public works in 2023 include $278,000 for hardtop road maintenance. This is the labor, equipment, materials, and contracted services related to the maintenance of our asphalt and surface treated roads, including a patching, sweeping, shoulder maintenance, asphalt repairs, etc. $468,000 is for roadside maintenance. This includes roadside mowing, weed spraying, brushing, tree trimming, debris, and litter pickup. There's a $973,000 for gravel road maintenance. Maintenance based on a 3-year average that includes labor, equipment, materials, and contracted services to resurface, undertake subgrade repairs, grading, dust control, patching, and washouts. Winter control for would be $974,000. This is for the plowing and sanding of the township roads. And I mentioned the overall winter control budget is based on a 6-year average of expenses with inflationary adjustments. And this is an overall reduction from 2023. $667,000 in fleet and equipment costs. This includes the labor, parts, materials, fuel, and insurance costs to maintain the corporate fleet. We received we're estimating we will receive $625,000 in bag tag revenue through the township's pay-as-you-throw system or revenue has been increasing due to the ongoing monitoring of the township's collection contractor and increased growth. Bag tag costs have remained unchanged since 2015. Recycling collection is $598,000. The province has announced a phased transition to producer responsibility starting in 2023, with Loyalists transitioning to the new system in July 2025. We'll be bringing a report to council in the near term around the blue box transition system. This will remove all responsibilities for recycling collection and costs from the municipality. There's $240,000 in recycling revenue and stewardship fees. These fees help offset the current cost of recycling collection in the province. And this revenue will also end in July 2025 as part of the transition to producer responsibility. And finally, there's $1.35 million in solid waste collection and disposal, including waste collection contracts, 2 landfill site operations, yard waste and brush pickup, Christmas tree pickup, annual reporting, landfill labor and equipment. Our strategic initiatives for 2024 include the conversion of 2 seasonal winter contract positions into 2 full-time positions. The first position would be a technician operator. This position would support the implementation of the new municipal stormwater consolidated linear infrastructure, environmental compliance approval. It's a mouthful. We refer to it as CLI ECA, so you will hear that a lot in the near future. The province is moving towards a single license model, similar to how the water distribution systems have operated the last several years. So this new position will assist public works with the compliance, the inspections, the data collection, the development of the annual report that will now also be required for stormwater. The 2024 incremental increase for this position would be $52,000. The second position we're asking for is a full-time public works operator. So in 2022, another vehicle was added to the snowplow fleet in accordance with the development charges study. However, the 2 positions required to place the equipment into full-time use was not approved at that time. Currently, the township has insufficient full-time DZ drivers to operate our heavy plows and is relying on contracted services on some routes. This results in the additional cost of having to hire and train staff annually, resulting in an increase in complaints from the public when plowing isn't done the same way. The the 2024 incremental increase for this position will be $12,000. And I would note, one of the issues we've had with the contracted staff last year, I think we had 5 contracted staff who didn't make it to the end of the winter. So when we're having that rapid turnover, it's causing service issues down the roads. We've included $95,000 for a traffic calming project in Amherst. There are actually 2 projects. The first one is a project that engineering is looking at for Amherst Drive. And it's a pilot project which will look at temporarily reducing the width of the asphalt within certain area and introduce some weaving throughout that area using flex barriers and some other barriers in place, with the goal of looking at what the impact of that is and if it's something that's suitable for more of a permanent installation in the future, which would be done at a later date with more like concrete barriers and curbs and repaving and such. So the second project we're looking at is recognizing that if Amherst Drive gets traffic calming, what does the impact of that look like on Kildare? So if we slow the traffic down on Amherst Drive, we know full well that a lot of the traffic is going to bypass onto Kildare. So we've included additional money for some traffic calming along Kildare using the flex barriers that you often see in larger municipalities. So we're currently looking at installing flex barriers at the pedestrian crossovers, around the intersections, stop signs, mid-block areas where there's a need to slow that traffic down. And what the flex barriers is you're installing flexible barriers on the edge of the driving lane, not where the curb is, but the edge of the driving lane for the vehicle, and then one on the center line. So the vehicles are having to thread their way through these narrower openings on each of these crossings. They will be sized appropriately for buses, etc., but not by much. They are designed that you feel like you have to slow down when you're going through these things. The city of Kingston has recently done quite a few of these, and the results have been quite encouraging according to their press releases. I think they mentioned in their recent article that they saw about a 10-kilometer-hour decrease in average speed. When we did the traffic painting program 4 or 5 years ago, we saw about a 3-kilometer-an-hour decrease in the average traffic speed. As in any traffic calming, a common issue with traffic calming again is if we implement in isolation, the problem tends to just move elsewhere and you end up having to chase that around. So it's important to ensure that traffic calming be done in a much wider, look at the wider impacts of that work. They are flex barriers and they are seasonal. They will have to be removed in the winter. But we're doing this as a trial to see what the impact is, and we can do it over multiple years or move them around as necessary. We have a couple master plans that we're looking at for 2024. The first was the waste management master plan that we mentioned last year. Unfortunately, due to staffing constraints, and other priorities, we were unable to get the master plan off the ground. Engineering is going to take on that initiative in 2024 to see it move along. The goal of the waste management master plan is to basically look like a 20+ year framework for waste management services in the township. What's the life of the landfills? What comes next as we approach the end of those landfills? What other services do we want to provide, or what other services do residents want to have provided to them? Unfortunately, with the delay, we're not going to be able to hold off on doing the waste collection contracts until the completion of the waste management plan. So we will be proceeding with developing some waste collection contracts. Our current contracts end in July of 2025, and we need to have new contracts in place at least 12 months prior to that date. Whoever the successful bidder is needs to be able to order equipment. And as I'm going to speak to in Fleet, and I spoke last year, equipment purchases tend to be delayed since post-COVID. We've been seeing a lot of delays on the larger vehicles. So we need to make sure that they have sufficient amount of time to order the necessary vehicles. The other master plan is Odessa Stormwater Master Plan and Modeling. So under the new CLI ECA that the province has given the township for stormwater, there will be a requirement to do modeling and stormwater management or stormwater master plans and modeling of every urban community that has storm in it. We've chosen Odessa first because the county's currently working on the Main Street Odessa redesign through the entire section of Odessa. And it's important to ensure that we are picking up all the existing drainage issues, future development issues to the upstream side of Main Street, so the water can be appropriately channeled through the Main Street corridor and continue down south towards Millhaven Creek. The county has agreed to do a bit of a cost sharing on that study because they also have storm sewer within the county right away, and they will have the same requirement. They don't have their CLI ECA yet, but they are currently working on getting that. And finally, the last strategic initiative was the winter control liquid contract. So Public Work continues to utilize group purchasing where possible. And recently the township was included along with the other lower tiers in a 5-year tender for winter control liquid or DLA by the city of Kingston. The new pricing reflects a $4,800 annual increase over last year based on current usage. The township is expecting delivery of a new snowplow with a DLA unit by the end of this year, with any luck, which will allow the township to spray our own roads when desired. So in summary, the key operating changes for 2024, winter control costs have decreased by $50,000. Facility maintenance has increased by approximately $30,000. This is primarily due to the additional utilities around the expansion of the garage, as well as some work that was deferred due to the construction project was going on. There were certain types of work that we couldn't do while a contractor was on site. So some of that work was deferred until this year. Locating services for both stormwater and street lighting have increased by $122,000. Insurance is up by $42,000. Labor and benefits are up by about $83,000. Under waste management, bag tag revenue is expected to increase by $19,000. Again, there's no increase in the bag tag rate. Revenue from recycling stewardship fees is down $27,000 this year. Waste collection and recycling contracts are to increase by $72,000. And landfill rental equipment and contracted services are up $76,000. And again, this is primarily due to the additional work to ensure that the slopes of the landfill are meeting the ultimate design for that site. So, any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions at this time?
Through you, sir. Just one, a little more, I guess, detail on your Public Works general overhead increase. It's going up by over 200%. And just if there's any other details that you may not have included that could kind of fill in the gaps on why such a large increase.
So that the overhead is our fuel, our clothing, any conference and meeting work expenses. The management allocations is a chunk of it, where previously a portion of the Public Works manager's time was allocated to the ferry and transit operations. That is now being left in Public Works, so there's an increase for that. Training and other labor that isn't specific to area. So if staff are being asked to do some general things, then that time gets charged there. Insurance is in that same section. The utility costs are all in that section. And we also budget the new positions in there. So the new the two new budget positions are included in that, and they'll be allocated to the various areas if approved.
Any other questions at this time? Counselor Broderick.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a couple of questions. The waste management going up 40%. So is that basically the contract is geared to CPI? Is that why that's up so much?
Both the 72,000 for the waste collection recycling contracts are both due to CPI increases as well as growth. So they're
Okay.
both contracts are tied to the number of new houses and the CPI.
So that's a standard in the industry, I guess, that your contracts always have that clause in it, the CPI?
In my experience here at Loyalist, yes. Are other municipalities doing things differently? That's one of the things we need to look at as we're now preparing new waste collection contracts.
Okay, good to hear. So I might have missed this or misinterpreted, but 278,300 on hardtop road maintenance. Did you say that includes grass cutting, et cetera?
So
Where was that? Was that in that?
278,000 for hardtop road maintenance is related to the patching and
Okay.
street sweeping, shoulder maintenance, et cetera. The roadside
Oh,
maintenance is your grass cutting.
That's
and
right above
such.
it?
Yeah,
468?
that's correct.
And is that, I guess when I think of roadside maintenance, that's staff basically plus whatever machinery you need to do that?
The staff and there's some contracted services as well.
Okay.
So for instance, weed spraying is done by an external contractor that the county hires and we pay our portion.
And then we cut the county and we're reimbursed for that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Ennis.
Thank you, and through the chair. For traffic calming and the funds proposed for it. So the IMP identified some of the various areas where we might look at traffic calming measures. And they're all over Bathwood, Amherstview, Amhersttown. I think there was maybe some in rural too. The Amherst Drive pilot project strikes me as maybe a higher complexity, higher cost of the ones that areas. There may be other lower cost, lower complexity areas that have been identified. I'm just wondering what's the plan? Like, are we just doing this, the pilot and kind of parking the other areas that might be, lower cost, lower complexity, easier to get at? Or are we doing anything in conjunction to look at the lower cost, lower complexity? Just wondering about that.
I think for the Amherst Drive project, that one was selected because of the volume of traffic that we receive on that road. It is the township's highest volume road that we have that we look after. It's a fully urban area, lots of conflicting movements and several, it's been a long-standing complaints in this township. We chose Kildare because of the Amherst Drive project, but we also recognize that there was limited ability to for budget increases this year, so we had to be somewhat selective in where that money would get spent. It doesn't mean that next year that money can't be spent in other locations or even those barriers potentially move to other locations.
Any other questions? Counselor Willis.
Through the chair, could you give me a bit more on the waste management going up 40%? Because I get CPI, but CPI is not 40%. So is some of that because we've grown and there's more that we're covering? I'm just struggling because that's a really big piece.
Yeah, so in the waste, there was two components. There's the CPI, which is by far those are for the recycling and stormwater, and those are very large percentages of that contract. So they are up quite a bit on, I believe it was 13% each on those two, which has a bigger weight on the overall. The other work that we were looking at is the reshaping of the Violet landfill. So what we've identified over the last few years is that the slope that is being generated during the landfilling operation is not fully out to the extent that it should be. So in order to, if we continue at the current slopes, you're going to leave a sliver down the sides of each landfill or each slope of the landfill, which is reducing your overall capacity. And the higher we go with that, the more expensive to try and fix that issue. The other money that's in the budget for waste management this year is some road construction around the Violet landfill site itself. As the landfill has grown, we've had to relocate certain roads and where the garbage trucks are coming in. We had an incident last year where a truck flipped on its side as it was unloading. So we have to ensure that we are, providing a stable surface for those large vehicles as they're backing into the landfill and offloading. So there's money for road construction, mud mats, which will help stabilize the road surface on top of the garbage. So.
Councillor Pryor.
Thank you, through your worship. Just, if you can just give me an idea on transportation service dash county, you said retaining 2023 levels, is that?
That's correct.
So is there any danger in, is that a reduction of service, or how would you classify that, I guess?
So we look after the county road maintenance under an operating agreement with the county. All the lower tiers, I believe went through council last year. And every year we look at the equipment rates related to that, and then as well as the base allocation rate that the county pays us. Recognizing that if we increase the base allocation rate that the county's paying us, the county's just raising their rates to pay us. So we were looking at how we reduce our net levy without overly increasing the overall rate that we're paying the county, all the lower tiers. With the milder winters that we've experienced the last, almost 4 of the 5 years that I've been manager, we have struggled to meet the minimum base allocation rate that the county has established for those roads, and it's all due to winter control. Or for the vast majority of it is due to winter control. We met it last year in 2022 or 2022. We did meet the base allocation rate, but it was strictly due to the blizzard that had happened right at the end of the year. We would have been well under if that blizzard hadn't happened. So when we were looking at the fact that we were constantly becoming in under the minimum required, if we increased the base allocation rate, it was only going to make it worse for us. That could be solved by increasing the equipment rates, but it's a bit of a catch-22 because if we increase our equipment rates too much, then we're not even competitive with the private sector. So we have to be cautious. We do utilize the OPS, the Ontario Provincial Standard equipment rates, for establishing our equipment rates, and that's all the lower tiers do. There was a substantial increase in the OPS rate for 2023 because of the inflationary pressures, and all the lower tiers agreed not to implement that inflationary increase for this year. The agreement is we'll all look at it again next year, and if there's a need to adjust, we'll make the adjustment at that point.
Follow that up because I'm not very bright on this, but what do you mean by base allocation rate?
So the county pays the municipality, I believe it's about $6,800 plus or minus per kilometer of road that we maintain. That includes both summer and winter maintenance. Of that, we have to spend a minimum of 90% of that rate, or else we owe the money back to the county. If we spend more than 110% of that, then the county pays us the additional funds.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we get going too much further, I had originally indicated that we would try to wrap up in the 9 o'clock area. So I'm just not sure. I'm not sure how long the next presentation is, if we go ahead, or.
it's not as long as the previous ones that you just sat through. But, you know, we're happy to proceed however you would like to.
I don't want to
proceed.
cut it short. Like if it's in 10 minutes or whatever, then we can go ahead and do it and wrap up. If
Sure,
more than
and I
that, then
would
we
be
can
happy to
do
come
it
back.
Yes. Okay. Okay, we'll go through this one and see where we land.
Thank you, Your Worship, and honorable members of the council. I am pleased to present the 2024 operating budget for transit and ferry operations. So for 2024, right, yeah, no problem. For 2024, we budgeted approximately 937,000 for the transit operating budget, which is approximately 13.5% lower than 2023 budget. Reduction in the amount that we witnessed there is due to less money being budgeted for the accessible transit pilot project in 2024 in comparison to 2023. The budget number provided in 2023 budget was based on an estimated number of potential participants. The 2024 budget is based more closely on actual use. This will continue to be monitored and refined as the program continues. One of the other key items in the operating budget for 2024 is the contracted service fee that we pay to the City of Kingston for Route 10 MSP service. In 2024, for this year's budget, we budgeted 677,000, which is a 4% reduction. Amherst, the transit service is mainly funded by special area tax rates, provincial gas tax, and passenger fares. Through the gas tax funding, the Ontario government provides municipalities funding to operate and improve local transit. In 2023, our transit service carried around 138,000 passengers, and the ridership has been growing steadily since COVID-19 pandemic. But our overall numbers are still lower than 2019 level. In 2019, we at that time had carried around 143,000 passengers, and based on our current growth and trends, we believe this year in 2024 we will be able to restore our ridership levels close to the pre-pandemic levels. Some of the key initiatives for the transit, the first one includes the Accessible Transit Pilot Project. Loyalist Township entered into an agreement with the Kingston Area Taxi Commission for a period of 1 year for this pilot project. It started in September 2023 with the option to extend it for an additional year. The estimated cost of the service in 2024 is budgeted at 98,000. The accessible service will be essential for individuals living in Amherst. The pilot is a township commitment to providing accessible transit service to areas that are currently being serviced by conventional transit. One of the requirements that we had to meet. The second one is passenger fares. Our passenger fare collection for 2023 was $73,500, which was 20% higher than the 2022 collection. As we are witnessing growth in transit ridership, we have budgeted approximately 75,000 for the current year, 2024.
Any questions at this time? Councilor Broderick.
Just to you, Mr. Chair, just for my information, is the gas tax, is 100% of our gas tax go to transit? Your worship, yes, 100% of that. Thank you. And this has nothing to do with, I think, with this, but Ms. Blaze's presentation right at the start, we're going to be working towards that with the plan that we talked about earlier from, okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
The operating budget for the Amstel and Ferry service for 2024 is approximately 6.1 million and represents an increase of 21%. Some of the major factors for this increase are like this 1.5 million, 100% of which is subsidized by MTO. That MTO is funding directly related to the commissioning of new ferry. It includes $1 million for fuel and approximately $500,000 for training and contracted services. One important thing to note is that Amstel and Ferry service is funded by provincial subsidy passenger fares and ferry reserve, and therefore has no impact on the general tax rate. As per our current agreement, on average, MTO covers approximately 90% of our operating cost, and remaining 10% is funded by passenger fares and reserve. Our passenger revenues have been increasing steadily over the last few years, and for 2024, we have budgeted $425,000, which represents an increase of about 4%. The contracted services that I stated above includes the contract crews to support Amstel and Retreat training for our current staff members, project management services, and additional training cost, which will be funded 100% by MTO. Labor expenses related to, I think that's the next. Problem. So labor expenses related to our budget includes the creation of this new position, public transportation manager, creation of new position, marine services supervisor, temporary shore captain, and additional part-time position to support the ferry operations.
Thank you. Any questions on this item?
Yes.
Seeing none. Oh, did you have
Yeah.
one? Counselor Parks.
Thank you, the chair. Sorry, through the chair. I just wanted to clarify just a statement that you made. We're getting $1.5 million from MTO.
That's right. Additional approximately $1.5 million directly in relation to the commissioning of Amstel and to support.
And $1 million of that was for fuel, 500,000 was for training.
Yes, 1 million is approximately budgeted for the fuel, 443,000 approximately for contracted services, which includes hiring of contract crews to operate our current vessel so that our crew can train on the new vessel.
Thank you.
Project manager.
Thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to say that we are projecting an operating deficit of approximately $88,400 in 2024. Increasing operating costs are planned to be addressed with the new operating agreement with MTO, but since the new vessel is not in service yet, the costs are not fully known and the new agreement cannot be negotiated. The township will be conducting an in-depth ferry rate study once all those costs and for all those costs and agreements, once all those costs are known. We'll be meeting with the finance department to discuss some solutions to address the 2024 operating deficit, which may include possible interim fare rate increases. Once we have developed these options, we'll report back to council.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship.
Just looking at the clock, there is one more. There were a couple of reasons I wanted to break at least by 9:15. I'm not, yeah. I think it might be better to hold the next section until the next meeting on Thursday evening. The majority of us work days as well, and along with all of our staff. And it makes a very long day if we carry on too much further, I believe. So with that, I would entertain a motion to recess until 6 p.m. Thursday, February 1st. Is that not the date? Okay. Moved by Councillor Frederick, seconded by Councillor Willis. All in favor? Motion has passed.